Hey guys, what's back to the video? Black Panther Wakanda Forever is now out in theaters, and that wraps up Marvel Phase 4. So in this video, I'm going to be ranking all 15 movies and TV shows in Phase 4 of the MCU. There's going to be no spoilers for Black Panther Wakanda Forever, but if you want to check out my spoiler review and breakdown, click the link in the description down below. And before you get to these and you're in here and you enjoy all my movie and TV show reviews, reactions, and breakdowns, make sure to subscribe button notifications on so you don't miss any time up in the video or I go live. Both always get more time. Let's get right into it. So starting it off in 15th place for me, and this one might be a hot take, is Thor Love and Thunder. I do not like this movie at all. This is the only movie on this entire list that I've only seen one time. Thor Love and Thunder at the end of the day is just underwhelming in every single aspect. There were so many great possibilities going into this movie. I mean, we had Christian Bale entering the MCU along with this movie coming off of Thor Ragnarok, Avengers Infinity War, all these great movies with an awesome Thor, and this movie just goes back on every single thing that this character has achieved. At the end of the day, Thor Love and Thunder was just super underwhelming. I give it a 2.5 out of 5 stars. Moving on, in 14th place for me is Hawkeye at a 3 out of 5 stars. I think this show was just underwhelming in general as well. I really liked this show as it was airing, but the finale really messed the entire show up for me. I don't like a lot of the big character choices here, especially in regards to Kingpin, and I don't really have much else to say. I like Kate Bishop's character a lot, and I'm excited to see her future in the MCU, as well as Hawkeye. I thought Florence Pugh was a great character in this show as well. Again, I just think this show fell off towards the end. They were just waiting until the very end to pull a lot of the strings for the main story, and I just wasn't a big fan of it. Next up, in 13th place is Black Widow. I give this a 3 out of 5 stars. I'm leaning more towards a 3.25, like a 6.5 out of 10. I think this is a great action movie overall, but I think in the final act, the story just goes off the rails. It gets a little bit too ungrounded for me. I really liked how grounded and personal this story was all throughout, and then the final act just comes and goes, and it really messes up this story for me overall. I also think this movie was like way too late in the MCU. They needed to have this movie way earlier for it to have much impact, and I just feel like it was a weak start for Phase 4 in general. Next up in 12th place is The Falcon and the Winter Soldier at a 3 out of 5 stars. The reason I put this just slightly above Black Widow is because they're definitely the same tones, both very grounded, but I think consistently throughout, you have that great emotional factor with Sam Wilson and a lot of the characters. You really just feel the connection in this show, but at the end of the day, it just wasn't anything memorable for me. That's why it's at 12th place. And 11th place kind of has that same issue for me. It's just not that memorable. So in 11th place for me is going to be Moon Knight at a 3 out of 5 stars as well. Moon Knight is a cool show. I think there's a lot of great ideas and concepts, and I've been a person avidly saying that Moon Knight season 2 needs to be a special presentation because I just feel like this 6-episode format in general for the shows doesn't work, but for Moon Knight specifically, the way that you can build up this character, at least his introduction, I feel like it shouldn't be paced out like shows like Hawkeye or Falcon and Winter Soldier. It just doesn't work in that format, and I feel like Moon Knight again has so much potential with the topics that it's covering and how deep and dark it really gets, but the show just didn't really allow for that in the 6-episode format, sadly. I will also say though, Oscar Isaac does put on one of the best performances in the entire MCU. I do think though Ethan Hawke was kind of underwhelming, and that finale again was just super underwhelming, and it just wasn't worth the wait. I also do want to mention they cut out like literally the main chunk of the final action scene in the finale, and that just pissed me off. Now to 10th place though, and from here on up, I actually really like these projects and I'd rewatch them any day of the week. So in 10th place is Miss Marvel at a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I really love this show. I know a lot of people, this is where they kind of stopped watching the MCU shows religiously, I guess you could say, but I'm glad I watched this one because I really like it. I love the coming of age story that Marvel does here. I love Kamala Khan, and I love her whole family, just the dynamic. This is definitely, again, more of a kid-oriented show, but for me that doesn't matter because I still enjoyed the heck out of it. I love the whole globetrotting aspect as well. I mean, you take the first 2-3 episodes as a more personal story on Kamala Khan's family and then kind of the introduction of the Marvel stuff, and then you get into the more globetrotting stuff. I also liked how they kind of resolve a lot of the issues in episode 5, the globetrotting stuff in episode 5, and then you go on to episode 6 where you have more of this back to a personal story, and I feel like it really comes full circle really well. In 9th place is going to be She-Hulk Attorney at Law at a 3.5 out of 5 stars as well. I know a lot of people don't like this one. I personally enjoy it a lot. I love the comedic sitcom aspect. My biggest issue with this show comes into the fact that I feel like every week you have that big build up to that story, of that little story chunk at the end, and then you have an episode that's kind of distant from that, and I don't mind that. You have these 2 separate storylines every episode, but at a certain point towards the end of the show, it did feel like it was dragging on a little bit, and that's where my biggest gripe comes in. But other than that, I love Tatiana Maslany as Jennifer Walters. I think She-Hulk is a great character. The implementation of all these other MCU characters is so great, and the way that the story unfolds, I will say, even though I'm not the biggest fan of the pacing throughout the show, I think in the final like 2-3 episodes, the way it all unfolds is really cool. It's very unique and creative and still keeps that sitcom comedy aspect to it. It's also a lot more of a serious show than you'd expect for something like She-Hulk that's kind of advertised as a sitcom. I feel like there were a lot more deeper and darker things that happened in the last 2-3 episodes, which I really, really respect. But moving on, in 8th place for me is Wandavision at a 4 out of 5 stars. I absolutely adore this show. I definitely think it has that issue in the 9th episode, the finale, where you're just packing way too much in it. The finale really does drag this show down, but I rewatched both this one and another Marvel Disney Plus show, which is higher up on the list, right before Multiverse of Madness, and I still absolutely love them. They're the only 2 shows that I've gone back and rewatched. In WandaVision, I just love the way it flows. I love the way that like you expand out these characters, and Wanda is one of my favorite MCU characters, and I just love the way she's been played out throughout the entirety of the MCU. Obviously, you know, there are aspects of this show that aren't that great. I think Agatha was introduced as the villain figure a little bit too late, but at the same time, that allowed us to be in this state of confusion, and I think that works for a show like WandaVision, especially because it was the first Phase 4 project back from the pandemic. And then on the other hand, though, you do have other shows like Hawkeye where the mystery aspect doesn't really work as well, just for me personally. Next up in 7th place for me is Eternals at a 4 out of 5 stars as well. 7th place and up here are all projects that I absolutely adore, and these are projects that I just love from Marvel Phase 4, and this is a good chunk of them. This is 7th place, so this is a little bit over half of them. And again, Eternals kicks off this part of the list. I love this movie. I love this movie way more than the average person. I think this movie gets way too much hate. I mean, yes, I think it would have worked better in terms of character development as a show, but what we got in this movie was absolutely stellar. Visually, it's one of the best looking MCU movies. The CG is near perfect. I mean, I love all of the small action moments as well. This by far has some of the most creative MCU action as well, and just the different plethora of characters that you have and how chunky of a story this is. It flows super, super well. I mean, I think one movie you can compare it to in terms of pacing is Wakanda Forever. I think Wakanda Forever does drag a little bit in comparison to Eternals, even though they're fairly similar in runtime, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that's just because you have so many more characters to explore here and so many different storylines. And I think the Icarus twist in this movie is one of the better MCU twists in general. I wasn't really expecting, I mean, I had a hunch going in that there was going to be some sort of villain twist because they didn't really explore the villain that much in the trailers, and I thought this was a phenomenal choice. I'm excited to see the future of these characters. I don't really know if Chloe Zhao is the person to carry forward the Eternals franchise in the future, but I really like what she did here in this movie, and I'm just super excited to see where these characters go from here. Next up in 6th place for me is Shang Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, also at a 4 out of 5 stars. I would give this like an 8.5 though, not just an 8, but I think this movie all around is spectacular. Again, some of the best action we've had in the MCU. I love the mix of mystical and grounded in this movie, and it's literally like the only MCU movie that does that. It feels like the perfect mix of something that you'd see in like Guardians of the Galaxy, something super galactical, fantastical, but also that action that you get in movies like Black Widow, shows like the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and like movies like Captain America and the Winter Soldier. You have this great mix of all these different sides of the MCU, and that's exactly what I wanted here because I love the two polar opposite sides of the MCU so much. Shang-Chi was that perfect blend of all of it, as well as Simu Liu as Shang-Chi. He is absolutely phenomenal, and the rest of the cast, the actor that plays Wenwu is stellar. Wenwu is my favorite MCU villains. I think that one might be a hot take. I haven't seen many people agree with that one, but Wenwu is by far one of my favorite MCU villains. Just, he is so dark and such a compelling character and such a compelling villain. I'm just so excited to see the future of Shang-Chi as well. I mean, Dustin Daniel Cretton directs his heart out in this movie, and I love this character, and I'm really in love with this sub-franchise in the MCU, and I'm super excited to see Shang-Chi too, as well as how all this leads into the future of the MCU, because it seems like Shang-Chi is going to be a pretty big key player for the future. Now getting to the top 5, before we get into it, let me know your ranking for all of the MCU Phase 4 projects in the comments down below. But in 5th place for me is Loki, another 4 out of 5 star project. I love Loki so much. As you can tell, it's my favorite MCU Disney Plus show. Loki is just stellar. This is the other show that I did watch right before Multiverse of Madness, right after WandaVision, and I love this show. I love Tom Hiddleston. I love Owen Wilson as Mobius. I love all of the TVA members. I love the visual aspect, and the finale is by far, probably, I would say it's arguably the best Marvel Disney Plus show finale. I think She-Hulk it's definitely more creative, She-Hulk's is, but I do think this is like just Bayside. It's the best Marvel Disney Plus show TV finale. And I think what Loki excels in is having a consistent story that brings you back every week, but also still being a personal character study, because I feel like WandaVision was definitely a very personal story for the most part until you get to like episodes 8 and 9. But then I feel like that one was just still trying to like draw out tension. And Loki, while it definitely felt like there were individual stories stories within every episode, it still felt very character driven. I think that's also in part due to Sylvie's character. I think that character paired up with Loki, I think they just make such a great duo, as well as just the emotion behind all of this TVA stuff and just this unknowingness of like, where the hell even are we? We're literally outside of space and time, and anything can happen because we're in the unknown. And I think this show plays off of those ideas super well. In fourth place for me though is Werewolf by Night at a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely adore this project. I know I didn't get to do a full review here on YouTube because I was at New York Comic Con when it did come out, but this project is absolutely stellar. It's a breath of fresh air from the MCU. I think it's something we needed, especially MCU's Disney Plus content, because it feels so different than all of the shows, not only on like a pacing level, because again, this is only 1 hour, all the shows are like 6 hours, but also just on a creative side, on a production side. This feels like something completely different, and it is. And the performances and just how everything meshes together in this short and small but also impactful story. I love what they did here in the MCU with Werewolf by Night. I'm excited to see this character's future in the MCU, as well as just the implications of what special presentations are going to do for the MCU. I'm excited to see where we go from here in terms of introducing characters with special presentations, because in my opinion, Werewolf by Night was a huge hit. Now getting into the top 3 though, as you can tell, these are all movies. We're done with the Disney Plus project. So in third place for me is the newly released Black Panther Wakanda Forever at a 4 out of 5 stars. Now you might be asking, why is Werewolf by Night below this if it's a 4.5 out of 5? It was hard for me to judge and compare these two because Werewolf by Night is also only 1 hour. Wakanda Forever is near 3 hours. Werewolf by Night is on a Disney Plus production budget, and Black Panther Wakanda Forever is a full blockbuster movie. There's a lot of weird comparisons here, but I do think it equals out for Black Panther Wakanda Forever to be in my third place spot. Again, no spoilers here for the movie, and you can check out my full initial spoiler-free review as well as my spoiler review breakdown discussion video. Those will both be linked in the description down below, but I absolutely love this movie. I think it's a great movie overall. There are some iffy things for me. For example, the pacing was a huge thing. I felt like this movie did end up dragging in the middle or so, but I still do think it's just a great movie overall. The visuals, the characters, the themes, everything is just heartbreaking, and I feel like a lot of people are going to have this as their best MCU Phase 4 project, but for me, enjoyment, rewatchability, and that really is what I take into account when I'm rating a movie. At the end of the day, I just feel like Wakanda Forever, though it is a heartbreaking and emotional movie that made me a wreck by the end, it's just not something that I'm going to go back to, and I'm not going to go back and be like, oh, I want to rewatch this, I want to rewatch this. I mean, I'm watching it for a second time, but I think that's going to be it. I don't think I'm going to constantly go back to this one, whether it's because of the emotional weight of the movie itself or the fact that I just don't think it's that rewatchable. I just don't know if I'm ever going to go back to it that much. With that being said though, my second favorite movie of Marvel's Phase 4 is Spiderman No Way Home at a 4.5 out of 5. I do round this one up. It is an 8.5 out of 10 for me, but I absolutely adore this movie. I mean, we know the obvious reasons, but I think it's just such a personal Peter Parker story. And again, obviously Wakanda Forever has a lot of emotions, but the emotions in this movie just connected to me more because it was more of a culmination of my childhood as well. I mean, obviously that plays a big factor in the nostalgia of this movie, but I don't necessarily think it's even nostalgia that is what makes this movie that great, because these characters, Andrew, Toby, their Spider-Man, are essential to Tom Spider-Man actually growing. And I think that's what makes this movie so special for me, is the fact that it's not just nostalgia bait. Like, these characters, all of this is necessary for Tom Holland's character to actually move forward and become the best Spider-Man he can possibly be. I feel like a lot of people just aren't going to agree with me putting Wakanda Forever at third place, and everyone's just going to be like, oh, you're just nostalgia baited, whatever, stuff like that. But No Way Home, it just hits a special place in my heart. It is part nostalgia, but it's also part knowing that they crafted this multiversal story so perfect where it still becomes a super personal story by the end. But moving on, in first place, my favorite movie of Marvel's Phase 4 is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness at a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's an easy 9 out of 10 for me. I really love this one. I really do. I'm really biased though, because Doctor Strange is my favorite character in the MCU currently, and I just love this story about loss and how you just can't have everything you want, even though you're the hero that saved everyone. Your life just can't be perfect. You can't be the one controlling everything. And I love that message as much as I love the messages of loss and second chances in Wakanda Forever and Spider-Man No Way Home. This one really just hit for me. I didn't cry or anything like that during Multiverse of Madness, whereas during No Way Home and Wakanda Forever, I did shed shed tears. Multiverse of Madness does this cool thing of being a grand multiversal story, but still keeping it very personal in terms of like throughout the entire movie as we're traveling the multiverse and as we're getting introduced to these variants of characters. And I just feel like it has this like very universal theme of loss and grief, which almost every Marvel project in Phase 4 has had. On top of that, I'm absolutely obsessed with Sam Raimi. He's one of my favorite directors of all time. He has one of if not my favorite visual styles ever, and I love the way that he just injected that into this movie, injecting his style into the MCU. And I think his style and his cinematography works very well with this character of Doctor Strange. And I think just overall, I think every piece came together for this movie to work for me. I know Multiverse of Madness at first place and having it at a 9 out of 10 is a very hot take. I don't know like anyone that agrees with me on this one, but I really just like this movie. Again, like No Way Home, it just hits a special place in my heart. But that's pretty much it for my ranking of Marvel Phase 4. Let me know your ranking of all 15 of these projects in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.